a massive double disqualification for Ferrari absolutely ruins their race weekend, and more importantly, puts a massive gap between them and Mercedes for the Constructors' Championship. Don't know what's going on over at Ferrari at the moment. It was all looking good, P5, P6. I mean, not amazing, but I think I'll take it from the weekend. And I had a lot of learning to after last week. This has absolutely ruined the race weekend at Scuderia Ferrari. Ferrari disqualification for Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Both for different reasons, but absolutely torrid time for Ferrari, I think. I looked at them and they didn't look like they had great pace. Somehow Leclerc got more pace from front wing damage. I think it might have helped him down the back straight because he seemed to be absolutely flying down there. Russell looked like he had good time, but Charles still kept up with him and was really pushing him at one point in the race. But, I mean, what a terrible, terrible time for the qualifications. Let's get into them. For Hamilton, the rear skid block was too thin at the end of the race. It was below the 9mm it needed to be. I think we had a similar thing happen last year for Hamilton and Mercedes as well, where he took too much off the rear skid block. It means they're probably running it a bit too low, took a bit too much of the curbs. We saw a Ferrari team talk to Leclerc about not taking the curb at turn 2. Don't think it necessarily been there, probably clattering over the last couple of corners of the lap. Taking the wide angle might have just done it for Hamilton, plus running a little bit low. But P6, we're really, really disappointed after what was a great day yesterday for them. To not get any points from the weekend is terrible. And Charles Leclerc, underweight from the fuel. Could have been a similar situation to Russell in Spa last year, where Russell did the one stop unexpectedly and then didn't really have enough fuel and wasn't able to get enough tread back onto the tyres after the race to get himself back up to weight. He was just overweight Leclerc when he came back to the pits, but after the fuel sample loses the weight down to 799 out of the 800 kilograms specified and is disqualified. And I mean, terrible, terrible result for Ferrari. Definitely the biggest losers of the weekend. Lost chance in the championship. Good points they scored, especially with Lawson still languishing all the way down outside of the points. Terrible result for them. They'll be really, really disappointed. And Hamilton will be asking himself, why again? And Charles, he's used to this by now. Ferrari seem to have this sort of thing where even when things are looking okay, not terrible, it didn't have a water leakage this weekend, and still no points at Ferrari. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have McLaren with a 1-2, a P1 for Oscar Piastri, and a P2 for Lando Norris. This is exactly what I thought would really happen for Piastri. I thought he'd probably get it into the lead and run away with it. Russell definitely put him under pressure at the start line. Squeezed him out, did Piastri. Got through. Russell thought he had a second chance, but no, it wasn't really there for him. And Piastri sort of ran away. Didn't put a massive gap between himself and anyone, but I think he was just always there, putting in solid laps and keeping a good distance, clean air the whole race. Really had the tyres definitely at the end. But Norris couldn't really put him under pressure there at the end with that brake issue that he had. Looks quite scary, really. I think, was it lap 49 or 50? They started talking to him about this brake issue, how it started to go longer, it was going to get longer and longer and longer. I think at lap 55 they said it was critical. I think early on Norris probably wasn't taking it seriously. They said he needed to calm it down to the last couple of corners. I don't know if he necessarily did to start off with. The lap times didn't really start to increase until about lap 54, 55 when he really stopped. And you could see in the interview afterwards, he was really nervous about it. I don't blame him. One of the biggest straights on the calendar. And absolutely clattering down at about 190, 200 mile an hour, trying to get it stopped when you don't really have any brakes. Russell caught him by 7 seconds in 2 laps. If there was one more lap, I don't think Norris would have scored P2. But for him, he's still in the lead of the championship, keeps ahead of Piastri for now. McLaren get the 1-2, Zach Brown's happy, Andrea Stella's happy. Everyone at McLaren's happy, apart from the people that have been looking into the issue as to why the brake problem happened. Red Bull with a P4 for Verstappen and a P12 for Liam Lawson. I don't know what's really going on for Lawson at the moment. I've said this before and I'll say it again. It just seems like he's not okay with the car. Even starting down in P20, started from the pit lane, they made some aggressive changes. Heard that Lawson didn't really like the changes they made. Maybe the aggressiveness of the changes didn't help him, but still only P12, and that's flattering because he did finish P15 on the road. before those 3 disqualifications to Gasly, Leclerc and Hamilton. So it's made up 6 positions in the whole race, and one of those was Alonso, who DNF'd. Really terrible weekend for him, one to definitely forget. I don't wish anything ill towards him. Hopefully, so this last week, hopefully he can improve and just settle down a bit, but really doesn't seem to have the balance of the car at all. Unlike Verstappen, who was P4 and on a different day, could have maybe gotten to the top 3. He looked okay. So a quiet race like Russell had last week, where I didn't really need to talk about him a lot, didn't see him a lot on the screens, wasn't really battling with anyone, wasn't really overtaking anyone, just sort of running his own race. And I think for Red Bull, where Verstappen himself said they're the 4th best car, a P4 was more than good enough for them at this point, especially with Ferrari not getting any points this race weekend. Mercedes with a P3 for George Russell and a P6 for Antonelli. A good weekend for Russell. I think I'll definitely take the results he's had. P3, big bag of points to take back with him. I think Mercedes are 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, behind Russell's great performances. And yeah, I think nice, a bit quiet, pushed for that P2. I think, like I said, an extra lap for him, probably gets that P2 in the race. But I think McLaren's just have too much pace. They seem to look pretty good in their tyres, even though everyone was really good in their tyres all weekend. Well, during this race at least, the tyres looked a lot better, probably due to the race being a few degrees colder than it was in the sprint race yesterday. And, he called it early, one stop, pulled off the one stop really nicely. P3 for George Russell. Antonelli, a bit disappointing for me. I know he lost out in the pit stop phase to Ocon. I think Sonoda was around the same area as well. Started P8, goes up to P6, but if you remove the 2 DNFs, he would have finished in P8. And I think, if Russell can get P3 in a Mercedes, and if questioning why Lawson can't improve, I think you got to say the same about Antonelli. He should be able to get past Ocon, should be able to move himself into that top 6 fight if he really wants to push on and earn some big points at Mercedes. I still think he definitely deserves the drive there, but not a great performance in the race from him. Really struggled to make a move or make anything happen after the first pit stops. Haas with P5 for Esteban Ocon and P8 for Oliver Bearman. Great performance for the Haas drivers. I know they both jumped up two places due to the disqualifications for the Ferrari team, but if you'd have given Haas double points at the start of the weekend, they'd have ripped your hand off. I did not have them getting double points from this. I thought Ocon would fall backwards down the grid, and I thought Bearman would struggle to make any movement. Neither of those things happened. Both of them gave a bunch of positions. As you can see, 4 positions gained for Ocon during the race, and 7 for Bearman during the race before they got those extra 2 positions from the Ferrari boys. And they did it under different circumstances. Ocon made a few good moves to start off with, entered the pit stops early, got back out ahead of Antonelli, sort of drove off into the distance away from him. Antonelli couldn't really do anything after the pit stop phase to get back at Ocon. And Bearman stayed long. So Ocon going first into the new tyres, Bearman went long on the hard tyres, swapped to the mediums later on. Great effort from him for P8, made some great moves, kept the race entertaining, more entertaining than anyone else, managed to keep the race unfortunately. But Haas double points, massive haul of points for Haas at this point of the season when they really looked like they didn't have the car just 24 hours ago. Great result for them, onwards and upwards for the American team. Williams with P7 for Albon and P10 for Carlos Sainz. Another team where they really look better than they actually finished because of those 2 disqualifications. Only P9 on the road for Albon. Bearman walked straight past him and looked like he drove P7. Sorry, P9 on the road for Albon, P7 to finish the race for Albon. Sort of didn't really do a lot. We didn't see a lot from Albon during the race, but he managed to keep it in the points anyway. Looked quite good. Sainz, on the other hand, didn't really seem to do a lot, and really, really flattered because of the 3 disqualifications that he benefited from to get a point in the race. Didn't look too great. Still looks, a bit like a rookie out there. Bit of a rookie performance. If you'd have swapped him and Antonelli around, I don't think you could have told the difference between them if they were in the car this weekend. You'd have probably said it was a good performance from Antonelli if he was in the Williams and managed to get himself from P15 to P13 and then to the points with the disqualifications. But Williams really need both of their drivers to be up there. They both managed to capitalise, on the mistakes, which is what they need to do in the midfield battle to keep themselves in that top 5 fight. But Sainz really needs to be up there, right on the back of Albon. They both of them to be as high as possible, to maximise these gains. They didn't maximise the gains; they benefited. I think Williams would be I don't think they'll be hugely disappointed, but I think they'll be a bit disappointed that they didn't even get even more points from this weekend. Aston Martin with a DNF for Alonso and a P9 for Lance Stroll. Really disappointed for Alonso with the brake issue. Looked like it was on fire during the first, I think it was the fourth lap of the race, where he had to eventually pull over. Looked like he was doing okay, nothing too special, but unfortunately lost him early. And, it's a question of what could have been for Alonso in the race. If Lance got the P9 due to the 3 disqualifications ahead of him, Alonso could have been in there as well, and maybe Aston could have got double points. A team where, a bit like Haas didn't really look anywhere a week ago, and then they look like they're making little gains, little steps. I thought they should have just maybe forgot about this year, but maybe they do have a chance here to go in that midfield battle and claim P6 or P7 in the Constructors' Championship. They looked pretty good, pretty nippy. Stroll made a good strategy work for him, going really long. I think when Tsunoda pitted, Stroll was doing the same sort of lap times as him still at that point in the race. So really good performance from Lance Stroll. Give credit where it's due there. But I think they'll be a bit unhappy with how Alonso had to go out with that mechanical issue. But overall, good performance for Aston Martin. Give them 2 more points for the championship. Racing balls. Tsunoda P16 and Hajar P11. 3 disqualifications and neither get points from, they started P9 and P7. Well in the points at one point. The only team to go for the double stop with a purpose. Hamilton sort of had to do it with Verstappen catching him. Didn't really look like he was going anywhere. Would have lost the position anyway, so it was fair enough. But Racing Bulls, horrific race strategy. Really disappointed performance from them to end the race and the weekend, where 3 races so far, and they should have had points in all 3, and probably you could argue should be P6 in the Constructors, maybe even P5 in the Constructors, with the performances of Tsunoda, and especially this weekend Hajar put in. I mean, Hajar to get his car back up to P11 did really well after that pit stop. But what are they doing there? Ruined the weekend last weekend, ruined the race this weekend. It feels a lot like they've just stolen anyone that made strategies at Ferrari over the last 5 years and put them in the team and just went, do what you want. Just go for it, do what you want. Don't ignore everyone else. We'll just run our own little race, because Russell called it early. Everyone else was going to try it. You have to, at least with one of the cars, try and go long. If it looks like no one else is pitting, if you want to go early with Tsunoda, try and beat any undercuts, go for it. I think they tried to do it to try and get out ahead of Stroll, because of Stroll's going long in the race, and they thought maybe that was a way to get back at him. But really terrible decision from the Racing Bulls. 2 very disappointed drivers. The result is not a reflection of their performance this weekend whatsoever. They did really well, and what they did, they deserve to be winners from this weekend, but they're not going to be. And also, to add to that, the destruction of Tsunoda's front wing that just seemed to collapse by itself. I've not seen anything about why it may have just completely destroyed inwards on itself. Absolutely poor weekend from a Racing Bulls standpoint, from a team standpoint, not a driver standpoint this weekend. Alpine with a disqualification for Gasly and a P13 for Jack Doohan. Gasly, same thing as Leclerc with it being underweight. I think again the one stop might have just caught them out with the amount of fuel left in the car at the end and not having the rubber on the tyres to get themselves the allowance. I think that was also very close with him coming at 799 kilograms instead of the 800. So unfortunate for Gasly. I know it would have been silly to say he could have capitalised on Leclerc and Hamilton's disqualifications, but they really could have, and he could be sat there with a P9 at the end of the race, and they'd probably gone, we'll take that. Not great, we'll take that. But he sat there disqualified. Unfortunate for him. I still expected more from the Alpines, to be honest. I still think that what they showed in testing, does seem to be the car there. I mean, Doohan didn't finish behind the Saubers. He was at least ahead of them. But Doohan, really not a great weekend from him personally. I put P13, I think he actually finished P16 on the road. I don't really know what's going on with Doohan. We thought he'd come in and have a lot of pace. Clarted into one of the Saubers yesterday. This weekend tries his best to wipe Isaac Hadjar out, and I think that Hadjar will look at it very disappointingly in the fact that he finished only 2 seconds behind Sainz on the road. If Doohan wouldn't have held him up or wouldn't have pushed him off the road, Hadjar could have caught Sainz and maybe been on for points this weekend. So I think that Hadjar will be feeling very aggrieved by that. Doohan got off very lightly, I think, with just a 10-second penalty. That's 2 penalties in 2 races for him and a DNF last weekend. Not looking great. And is the pressure getting to Jack Doohan with Colapinto waiting in the wings? I mean, the thing with Colapinto is he was quite erratic last year and put the car in the wall a few times. So he needs to at least be showing the pace to be up there with Pierre Gasly on the road. And he's not quite doing it at the moment. Now, he is a rookie, less than 10 races in. I think he will be given at least 10 races into the season. I think it'd be very harsh for them not to. But Doohan, unfortunately, is on the same sort of watch as Lawson at the moment of, the first person to potentially be replaced this season. Finally, the Saubers finishing P14 and P15. The team that gets the most generous look from the disqualifications, P17 and P18 on the road, absolutely nowhere. The only team to be fully lapped and sort of not based on Yuki Tsunoda where he had to pit again, not based on necessarily poor decisions. It was just out and out poor pace from Sauber, more what we'd have expected from them this season. I think this is sort of a glimpse into the future. I think this driver pairing is not going to be one to be looked to be replaced at the end of the year because the result isn't a reflection of them. They're not going to be very good. I don't think they're going to be able to capitalise a lot on anything because I think they're going to be far behind. I think slowly as the season goes on, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. I think it's more to see if they will stay within that qualifying time percentage than anything else. I've seen a few people say that, the group pack is so tight that Sauber's just unfortunately the last ones. They've been a poor car for a couple of years now. I don't really see why they would improve the car. Maybe give it to race 8 in Spain, put a few bits towards the car, keep an eye on the development. But unless it's going to help next year's car when they become Audi, I don't think Sauber should be expected anything from them. But on to my winners from the race weekend. Now, I put Ocon here, but it's Haas as a whole. P5 and P8 in the race. Yes, they got the improvements from those qualifications, but still, P7 on the road for Ocon. Brilliant performance. A huge haul of points for Haas, who looked well off it just a couple of days ago. This is what we expected from them after the testing. Probably more than we expected from them after the testing. The car doesn't look like it's made of tinfoil anymore. Looks quite steady. Looks like a good race car. Behrman making some good moves down that back straight. Looked quite nippy. He looked confident and in control, which is really good for Behrman. I think he's looking quite advanced in that aspect compared to some of the other rookies. So really good for Haas. Next, I have Mercedes and especially George Russell. Now, he dropped a position and came P3, but crucially, good weekend for them, mainly because of Ferrari's being disqualified. The race looks to be on for P2 in the constructors, maybe not P1. And Russell's keeping Mercedes there or thereabouts. Another podium for him. He'll be really happy. Then we've got Williams. Again, double points finish for them. Got a bit lucky for the Sainz one, but Albon was still in the points at the end of the race. Midfield team, if you're in the top 10, you're in the midfield and you're getting points every week, you will finish 5th or 6th in the Constructors' Championship. That's just how it is. Williams doing exactly what they need to do for that. And finally, Oscar Piastri is the big winner from this weekend. Got the race win in this race, came P2 in the sprint race. Huge haul of points gathered when compared to Norris. I think, I think he got about 14 points. No, 13 points gained over Lando Norris over the course of this weekend. Right back in it after last week's debacle with going off the road. I think, he'll be more than happy. And if after 2 races he'd be in this position, I think he'd be quite happy. And the big losers from the race weekend, or the final race to be exact, Yuki Tsunoda and the Racing Bulls team. We've seen Tsunoda try and keep a bit level-headed. We saw a bit of anger when the front wing went. I think we are going to see angry Yuki Tsunoda at some point this season because they seem to have a good car. The strategy does not seem to be there for them. And I think he will be absolutely fuming. And, Hadjar and Tsunoda both did really well to get to where they did. Both dropped out because of the team strategy. And Tsunoda, I don't think will take that. He's not taken that in the last few years. I think he won't take it again. And Liam Lawson. It says P12, but P15 actually on the road. Only made up 6 positions. Really terrible weekend for him. Verstappen's P4 and Lawson's P12. Really, really not a good look for him. And, Doohan's got an eye over his shoulder at Alpine. I think Lawson needs to keep an eye on his shoulder at Red Bull. Marco has come out and defended him a couple of times now. But, as Ted said, they paid off Checo Perez. They really need him to start putting in some good performances. And finally, the Ferraris are the biggest losers from the race. Double DQ, really terrible for them. There's not really a finger to point at anyone. It's just one of them things. But really terrible when Mercedes are getting the P3s, Verstappen's getting the P4s. Even, McLaren's are well up there. Terrible when they're fighting for second in the championship. And that's everything from me. It was an okay race, nothing too amazing or special. And yeah, good weekend. No race for a couple of weeks. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.